In this video, I will show you how I upgraded the original factory-installed suspension of my Porsche 996 using a coilover suspension kit from H&R.
My name is Bruce, and I'm the Porsche 911 guy.
In 1999, the rest of the world outside of North America was introduced to the Porsche 996.1 GT3. Porsche fitted with a set of coilovers damped by Bilstein and sprung by H&R. H&R offers a coilover package designed specifically for the 996, and this GT3 style coilover setup is what I chose, since H&R is the OEM German manufacturer. The kit from H&R includes 2 specialized wrenches, lubrication, basic guidelines and warranty information, and of course front and rear coilovers with their corresponding springs. In this orange pamphlet marked Important, they suggest before you do any work, you should take beginning measurements for all 4 corners of the car. After the work is completed, I can record the final measurements here. So this is my car before coilovers, and you can see the gap between the wheel and the wheel arch. Using a laser and a measuring tape, I measured from the center of each wheel to the center of each wheel arch and recorded the measurement on the orange pamphlet. Being in Canada, as expected, I use a hockey puck as a cushion between my jack and the Porsche jack point. I removed my decorative lug bolt caps before lug bolt removal. I know I'm putting a jack stand in an unsanctioned area. I do not endorse this, but it's not really bearing any weight, it's just there more for my safety. Using a 10mm socket, I removed the bracket holding the brake hose. I also removed the bolt holding the electrical connector for the brake wear sensor. Using a T55 Torx, I removed the brake caliper bolts. I removed the brake caliper and hung it out of the way using a bungee cord. At the top of the strut, in the front, I carefully marked the present positions of the 3 nuts holding the strut in place. forgot to remove the rubber grommet that holds the sensor cable to the strut. I then wrap the top of the strut in bubble wrap so I don't accidentally scratch the paint of the fender's wheel arch. This plastic clip holds electrical wires and has to be removed. It was brittle and had been broken in the past. It was held on with some zip ties. I decided it would be a good idea to replace the top mounts at this time. Lemforder was the OEM, and this is the part number. Some parts need to be saved from the original strut assembly to be reused on the new assembly. These spacers are also from the original strut. I cleaned the rust off and repainted them. This rubber mount has an indentation on it where the new spring will sit. I reused the original steering bearing. I thoroughly cleaned and re-greased the ball bearing assembly. The H&R coilover comes with a new nut. This is what the assembled unit looks like with the spring seated into the top mount correctly. So, Now we'll do the other one. I did end up taking this apart so I could repaint the two washers. I needed a 6mm Allen key to hold the shock in place while tightening the top nut. Just for fun, I lined up the lettering on the spring with the front of the coilover, but no one will ever see it unless the wheel is off. I didn't have a large enough wrench for the top nut, so I just used an adjustable wrench. I cleaned up the wheel carrier a bit to allow the new coilover to slide in more easily. I'm installing the coilover so the lettering, as well as the arrows on the top mount, face outward. I slowly jack the coilover up into place. I put the 3 nuts into the new coilover finger tight. Then jack the coilover assembly fully into place. It is seated correctly when this tab is flush with the top of the wheel carrier. I reinstalled the electrical wire clip and fastened it into place with a couple of zip ties. Once again, I jacked up the car in an unsanctioned area. To access the top of the rear shocks, I had to remove the shelf behind the rear seats. I removed the 3 nuts using a deep 15mm socket. I then remove the nut and bolt, holding the bottom of the shock. As well as the sway bar link. I used a spring compressor on this one, but I don't think it was really necessary. Here, I'm removing the top nut of the rear shock assembly. Now, you definitely need a spring compressor for this step. Otherwise, the uncompressed spring could send the top nut flying dangerously across the room. Same as the original front assembly, some parts from the rear shock assembly need to be saved and reused on their new coilover. Anytime I disassemble something, I always line the parts up in order of removal. Then, when it's time for reassembly, the parts go back on in reverse order. The supporting mounts for the top of the rear shock are quite expensive. If you examine your original mounts closely for cracks and delamination, maybe you can reuse them. Mine appeared fine. These are some of the parts I reused. I measured from the center of the sway bar link mounting bolt hole to the center of the shock mounting bolt hole. It measured 57.06 millimeters. So I adjusted the sway bar mount of the new coilover to the same 57.06 millimeters. H&R provides a couple of wrenches. One is for adjusting the spring seat, and the other is for the lock collar. I put some black tape on the wrenches to protect the finish on the new coilover. Later on, I switched out the black tape and put on some shrink wrap tubing instead. I loosened the locking collar and backed it off. I then marked the beginning position of the helper spring. Similar to the front assembly, the top coilover mount has an indentation where the H&R mainspring needs to sit. I had to back off the helper spring a little more because the shaft wouldn't go through the mount. Similar to the front coilover assembly, I tightened the top nut using a 6mm Allen key and an adjustable knuckle buster. What I'm going to do here is adjust the helper spring back to somewhere close to my original mark of the beginning position. While down there, I noticed my rear sway bar bushings need replacement. As you can see, the car is sitting much lower now. The method I used to take the original starting wheel height measurements is the same method I'm about to use to take the resulting wheel height after coilover installation. First, I measured for the exact center of the wheel cap. Then, with a laser level on my jack, I lined it up with the exact center of the wheel. With a tape measure, I measured from the exact center of the wheel straight up to the center of the wheel arch, or the fender. I recorded the measurements in inches and in millimeters. So it turns out it's 11 3/4 inches, or 29.9 centimeters, which is lower than the 1-inch drop I'm looking for. I'll have to remove the wheel and adjust the spring seat to bring the ride height up to 13 1/8 inches, or 33.4 centimeters. To do this, I'll have to use one wrench to back off the locking ring, then use the other wrench to raise the position of the spring seat upwards. It's kind of trial and error, because I found the amount I raised the spring seat didn't directly relate to the amount the ride height actually raised. I put the wheel back on, rolled the car out and back into the garage to level out the suspension. I set the laser level up again and recorded another measurement. Remember, the ride height that we are looking for is 13 1/8 inches, or 29.9 centimeters, making it 1 inch lower than the factory. After several attempts, I found this micrometer reading of 88.34 millimeters is the distance I need between the top of the wheel carrier and the bottom of the lock ring. Now I'll use the H&R wrench to lower the spring seat down to meet the lock ring. I'm double checking to ensure I'm at my 88.34 millimeter spacing. Did you know 911s shipped to North America differ from European 911s because of different road conditions, Department of Safety standards, bumper height, etc.? Every North American spec 911 since the 1960s have been shipped with a taller ride height than the rest of the world, 20 to 30 millimeters or approximately 1 inch taller to be precise. So a stock North American 996 may look fine on its own, but it looks like a 4x4 truck compared to a European spec 996. Porsche offered optional X73 and X74 sport packages for the Turbo and C4S models, as well as a ROW30 suspension that could be retrofit into a base North American 996. These packages lowered the ride height by 30 millimeters or about an inch front and rear. So that's why after coilover installation, I will lower the ride height 1 inch to achieve more of a European look for my 996. Now that I have verified I'm at the ride height I was looking for, I applied the lubricant H&R had supplied. Then tighten the lock collar into position. Perfect. Same as the front, I set up the laser level to the exact wheel center and measured up from there. It's at 12 3/4 inches or 32.4 centimeters. So I'll have to raise it to meet my target height of 13 1/4 inches or 33.7 centimeters, which makes it 1 inch lower than factory. I need to adjust my rear coilover up to meet my target height. Again, I'll be using the lubrication oil provided by H&R to protect the threads. So, same as the front, it took several attempts of putting the wheel back on, moving the car in and out of the garage, and remeasuring. After many attempts, finally, it's perfect. Now I have achieved my 1 inch drop from factory standard. Perfect. I made this tool out of an old O2 sensor socket by using my angle grinder to cut a slot into it. You could, of course, buy a specialized tool for this. Ensuring the 3 top nuts were centered within the markings I had made previously, I torqued them down to 24 foot-pounds. I made another special purpose tool to hold the top of the shock in place as I torqued down the nut.